All right, let's talk about a word we all use and probably use on ourselves way too often: lazy. Today, we're going to tear that idea apart. We're going to dismantle the myth and look at what's really happening in your brain and your body when you feel completely stuck.
Oh man, you know that feeling, right? Your to-do list is just sitting there kind of mocking you. You know exactly what you're supposed to do, but it feels like there's this invisible wall between thinking and doing. You feel paralyzed. And what's the first word we always reach for? Laziness. But what if that label isn't just wrong, but it's completely missing the point?
Okay, so let's get right into it. Most of us grew up with the myth that laziness is a moral issue, a simple lack of willpower. But the scientific reality is so much more interesting. What we call laziness is actually a pretty sophisticated biological signal. Think of it less like a character flaw and more like a check engine light. It's a protective response from your brain when it senses a threat, even if that threat is just a huge project looming over you.
To really get this, we've got to go inside the brain. So let's dig into the actual neuroscience behind that feeling of being totally frozen in place.
This brings us to a fascinating concept called functional freeze. So you have a part of your brain called the amygdala, and you can think of it like a really jumpy security guard. When this guard sees a task that feels way too big or too hard, or, and this is a big one, is tied to your fear of failing, it doesn't see a chore, it sees a tiger. And instead of fight or flight, it sometimes chooses a third F, freeze. It's a protective shutdown. Your nervous system is literally slamming on the emergency. So how in the world do you get past this overzealous internal security guard? Well, here's the strategy. The big, scary task is what trips the alarm and your amygdala hits the freeze button. The trick is to shrink the task into something ridiculously small, what some call a micro-step. I mean, so tiny it's almost laughable. Not write the report, but open the document. Not go for a run, but put on one running shoe. That tiny little action is so non-threatening that it just sneaks right past the alarm system. And just like that, the threat signal is off and you're actually in motion.
But what if it isn't a panic alarm? What if it feels more like you're turning the key in the ignition and nothing? This is where we run into something called executive dysfunction. Your prefrontal cortex is supposed to be the CEO of your brain, right? It handles planning and initiating and executing, but sometimes there's a disconnect. The desire is there, but the bridge from wanting to do it to starting it is just out. This cognitive load is so mentally draining it feels exactly like physical exhaustion.
But look, it's not just about the brain's wiring, it's also about its chemistry. Let's talk about the actual fuel that powers our motivation.
Here's a statement that, it might just hit a little too close to home for a lot of us. In our world today, that feeling we label as lazy is often a sign that our brain chemistry is just completely out of whack. To put it simply, many of us are dopamine depleted.
And this visual really gets to the heart of it. We spend so much of our day scrolling, streaming, gaming, all these things that flood our brains with huge, easy hits of dopamine. It's like brain candy. This jacks up our baseline for what feels rewarding. So when it's time to do a normal, everyday task, like cleaning the house, the potential dopamine reward is tiny by comparison. Your brain isn't being lazy, it's chemically bored. It finds the task genuinely painful because it's been trained to wait for a much bigger payoff that just isn't coming.
Okay, so beyond the brain's wiring and its chemical soup, our own thoughts and beliefs can build some pretty powerful walls that keep us from taking action.
This reveals a wild truth. Sometimes, doing nothing is actually a strategy. A lot of people we might call lazy are really what you could call perfectionists in hiding. The fear that their work won't be perfect, and that imperfection says something terrible about them, is so overwhelming that their brain chooses the safest possible option. Don't start. Procrastination becomes a shield, protecting them from the pain of a result that might be just okay. And when that fear of failure turns into a real pattern of failure, it can bake itself into something even deeper: learned helplessness. After you've had enough experiences where your effort didn't get you anywhere, you can start to internalize a sense of total powerlessness. You just stop trying, even when you're in a brand new situation where you actually could succeed. The motivation's been extinguished by your past.
And this all leads to one of the biggest reframes in all of psychology. Procrastination is almost never a time management problem. It is an emotional regulation problem. When a task brings up negative feelings, boredom, anxiety, self-doubt, procrastination is a quick and dirty way to feel better right now. It's a short-term mood repair, even though it usually costs us a ton of long-term stress.
So when you put all this together, it becomes absolutely critical to be able to tell the difference between what we call laziness and other states that just look the same on the surface.
Let's take burnout, for example. From the outside, someone experiencing burnout can look like they've just stopped caring, but it's not an unwillingness to act. Burnout is a clinically recognized state of inability to act. It's caused by chronic emotional and physical exhaustion. The tank isn't just low, it's completely empty. The engine is seized. And the exact same thing is true for anxiety. When somebody avoids a task, it's so easy to see it as a lack of motivation, but very often it's a fear-based avoidance. The goal isn't to do nothing. The goal is to escape the distress and the discomfort the task creates. It's an active move away from a painful feeling, not a passive lack of caring.
So, where does all of this leave us? Well, it asks us to adopt a totally new perspective, one that's a lot more compassionate and, frankly, a lot more accurate. Let's zoom way out for a second to an evolutionary view. It turns out our brains literally evolved to be energy misers. It's a concept called adaptive conservatism. For our ancestors, calories were scarce. Wasting energy on something that didn't have a clear, immediate payoff, like finding food or running from a predator, was a terrible survival strategy. That ancient programming is still running in our modern brains, urging us to conserve energy at all costs. And in our world of abundance, that biological wisdom can feel an awful lot like laziness.
So, when you put it all together, the takeaway is this. The next time you feel that resistance, that inability to act, just stop and ask what might really be happening. It is probably not a failure of your character. It could be a functional freeze, it could be dopamine depletion, maybe it's executive dysfunction, or a hidden fear of failure. It could be the total exhaustion of burnout, or just an anxious avoidance loop.
And that leads us to the most powerful idea of all. That feeling you've been calling laziness, it's not a character flaw you need to power through or feel ashamed of. It's a message. That's it. It's a signal from your mind and body that something is wrong. A need isn't being met, a fear is being ignored, or your whole system is just completely overloaded.
So, instead of judging yourself for that feeling of inaction, try getting curious about it. Ask yourself, what is this really about? What is my body trying to tell me right now? Because the answer to that question, that just might be the key to finally getting yourself unstuck.